Hello and welcome to our presentation discussing evaluation of a coupled 3D atmosphere-ocean experiment in Spilhaus projection using our ICON Earth system model. This presentation is given by Niklas Röber from DKZ. A climate model allows us to simulate various processes governing the atmosphere, the ocean, the land, and the interactions between them. ICON is our next generation climate and weather model that is jointly developed by the Max Planck Institute for Meteorology, the German Weather Service, and the German Climate Computing Center DKZ in Hamburg. ICON is comprised of 3 models, one for the ocean and sea ice, one for the land, and one for the atmosphere. A coupler manages the exchange of mass, momentum, and energy between those models and connects them together. DYAMOND++ is a specific model setup that uses this coupled setting and simulates the Earth at 5 km horizontal resolution. That might sound coarse, but in 2D that accumulates to 20 million cells per level and about 3.5 billion cells for one 3D variable. At the bottom you see representations from a winter simulation, with the ocean on the left showing sea surface height, with everything in red above and in blue below mean sea level. In the middle we see the land surface, shaded according to the leaf area index, an indicator for the density of vegetation, and on the right hand side the atmosphere with clouds as a combination of vertically integrated cloud water and cloud ice. Over the last years we have performed a number of different experiments using ICON in various setups and with different resolutions. ICON can be used for global as well as for regional simulations, coupled and standalone with forcing. The German Weather Service uses ICON in a nested setup for weather prediction. At DKZ we primarily use ParaView for the visualization of simulation output, but also employ Python, Vapor, NCL and other freely available tools. The data is thereby often either projected onto a sphere or shown in equidistant cylindrical projection. The last visualization that just appeared shows a global ICON ocean simulation with only 1.25 km resolution. Not only is the data size huge, also the information therein is enormous, as can be seen by this side-by-side comparison of velocity magnitude on the left-hand side and vorticity on the right, showing a large eddy in the Atlantic just off the coast of North America. The Spilhaus projection gained quite a bit of interest over the last few years. A year ago I stumbled over a website discussing poor map designs, of which Spilhaus projection should have been one, but I didn't agree and was intrigued. Almost all other map projections show the oceans either separated with cutouts, clipping planes or strong distortions, but never connected together. The Spilhaus projection, on the other hand, displays the world's ocean connected as one body of water without separation and without strong distortion for the oceans. And it is perfect to show and understand global oceanic processes that go beyond a single hemisphere. Artilstan Frederick Spilhaus developed the idea in a publication in 1942, and much later in 2018 there was an inspiring article from arcis.com that studied this projection in greater detail. They found out that it was in fact an oblique slice of the Adams World on Square 2 projection. The beauty of this projection is also that it is double periodic, which means that it allows for tiling along the edges by rotation. We implemented the Spilhaus projection and made it part of our ParaView ICON NetCDF reader, so we can visualize our data easily in ParaView and present it directly in Spilhaus projection. The code will be merged with Kitware very soon and should be available shortly. Last year at Supercomputing we showed a large full-dome VR film at 4K by 4K resolution, also with data from our coupled ICON Earth system model. The data was also rendered in ParaView using OSPRay with path tracing enabled, but using the panoramic projection plugin in order to render directly for 180-degree views. This year we show the results from a different experiment that ran much longer and simulated 5 km horizontal resolution, the atmosphere with 90 levels and the ocean with 128 levels. The experiment simulated one model year and produced over 70 terabytes of data, thereby consuming roughly 215,000 node hours for the simulation. The goal for this diamond winter simulation is to resolve and study shallow convection and sub-mesoscale ocean eddies. Over the first 40 days, both 2D and 3D data was written out with a higher temporal frequency, while for the remaining days only one time step per day was written to disk. Therefore, we only visualized 90 time steps, the days of May, June and July 2020. Prior to visualization, the raw data was processed using the Climate Data Operator CDO to only select the variables needed, to merge the 3D fields of liquid cloud water and cloud ice into one 3D field representing clouds, as well as to compute the density of the oceans to later create an Isopycnal surface in ParaView. For the atmosphere, we visualized 3D clouds using volume rendering, as well as show the 10-meter wind field using glyphs, display an isosurface showing the jet streams and polar vortices, and the sea surface pressure using surface mapping. For the ocean and the Isopycnal layer, we show temperature, salinity and depth information, as well as 3D velocity using glyphs, and also by showing an isosurface enclosing the strongest currents. Parts of the visualization focus on the so-called Isopycnal layer. An Isopycnal layer is a layer of constant density on which most transport processes in the ocean's interior take place. Density, of course, depends on pressure, but also on temperature and salinity, and therefore the depth at which this layer cuts through the ocean can vary. At some points, it reaches a few thousand meters deep below the surface, while in other regions it is directly connected and interfaces with the atmosphere at the sea surface. In this example, this takes place just south of Greenland, and this is also the area in which the Labrador seawater is formed. The rendering was done in batch mode on our HPC cluster Mistral using ParaView and OSPRay. GPU nodes running ParaView with the user interface have been used for data pre-processing and for scene setup and composition, while the compute nodes were employed for the final rendering. All visualizations have been created using OSPRay with path tracing enabled. The image resolution is Full HD. And although only Full HD PNGs have been written out, due to the large number of different visualizations shown, all rendered images accumulate to about 65 GB in size. Editing was done using Adobe Premiere and After Effects. Adobe Audition was used for recording and for processing the narration. OSPRay in ParaView provides an interactive CPU rendering path for very large datasets that can be run on laptops to compute clusters, while GPU support is forthcoming in future releases. The path tracer was released in ParaView 5.9. For interactive viewing, a machine learning denoiser can be activated to reduce noise, and settings can be tweaked for higher fidelity or faster performance. The progressive rendering mode was used for interactive sessions, which start out with a low number of samples and converge to a less noisy image over successive passes after user interaction has ceased. The OSPRay path tracer was used for both geometry and volume rendering. A comparison of different rendering modes is shown on the right. Basic raycasting only traces rays coming from the camera. The resulting color is derived from the first object the camera ray hit. Weighted style ray tracing extends raycasting by casting secondary rays to compute other lighting effects, such as shadow and ambient occlusion. Path tracing computes ray paths of light bouncing off of other objects, or in the case of volume rendering, scattering in the clouds. By computing scattering, realistic rendering of participating media, such as clouds, is achieved without having to modify the transfer function. On the right are two images comparing the same scene with the same transfer function. The top is rendered using raycasting, while the bottom image enables multi-scattering using the path tracer. A live interactive demo of this data was shown at ISC 21. The whole Earth model was loaded on a small cluster using Intel Optane in cache mode to fit over a terabyte of data per node, which enabled a large time series to be cached and scrubbed interactively. Rendering was done inside of ParaView using OSPRay's MPI distributed rendering mode, which replicated the representation on each node to be able to use a path tracer with secondary rays. Creating animations from large simulations poses a number of different problems, including the task to convey how massive the amount of data is and how difficult the processing and the setup was. In this animation, we wanted to display the oceans in their entirety and show the connections between them, but also wanted to show a few details locally. Therefore, we strived for a balance between global and local views, and of course, the data offers a lot more interesting features that all would deserve to be shown. We also had to balance the annotation. While color table, the date, and a small description are annotated visually, most information is provided through vocal narration to not distract the viewer with reading. Focusing on the oceans in their completeness made us choose the Spilhaus projection. And of course, any projection from a sphere to a plane distorts. And although in this projection, part of South America and Asia are heavily distorted, in comparison to almost all other projections, the oceans are intact, connected, complete, and yes, distorted, but not as heavy as in some other projections. One problem though is the constant rotation. While preparing the animation, I tested one single rotation and that worked well. But using the same rotation over the entire film as an element of design leads to typical perceptual issues at the end. We would like to thank the European Union for funding our work.